Radio Freedom. We got it. And so do you, because you are our family, our front page family. Checking in right now with lead organizer here in Los Angeles for Black Lives Matter. She's a professor also, and she is an activist, obviously. Professor of Pan-African Studies, Cal State LA. Dr. Melina Abdullah, good morning.
Good morning, Sister Dominique. How you doing?
I'm blessed. How are you doing?
Blessed as well.
I don't know where you get all your energy. I really don't. You never seem to run out of energy. Like, call at 5 a.m, fine. Stay up all night protesting, fine. And have kids, fine. No problem. I don't know how you do it. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, there's a lot to unpack, right? I mean, I think part of what's happening here is media narrative versus reality on the ground. Let's start there.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we remember why we're in the streets. That we're struggling in the name of George Floyd, and in Los Angeles, we're struggling for the 601 people who've been killed by police since Jackie Lacey took office. And so it's important to uplift that. It's important to also, when you said, how am I doing? And I said, great or good or whatever it is, I said, the reason that I feel that way, that many feel that way, is that it's really powerful and encouraging to see so many people willing to stand up, and people by and large are standing honorably and feeling really rooted in the long struggle for Black freedom as they take to the streets to struggle in the name of George Floyd. On the other hand, mainstream media is neglecting a lot of these stories and is focusing on property instead of people.
It is interesting. I mean, I think social media plays a balance to that because, to some extent, the media has to pivot and cover stories when someone caught something on their camera that's not supporting the narrative that's being told on television. Sometimes they have to pivot and change, at least cover a story here or there. So I think it is actually, it's kind of a question too, like how much do we tape? How much do we share? I know, there's questions about people's legal, culpability, and, people worry about being photographed by law enforcement, but at the same time, it seems like sharing video, especially things like the police cruiser running into people and things like that might not have been, believed by mainstream media if we didn't have a video. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's right. I think that we look to social media to tell stories that are not being told. On Saturday, when we had the mass march off of beginning in Pan Pacific Park, but then marched down to 3rd and Fairfax, thankfully, people with large platforms like our partner in this work and one of my dear friends, Kendrick Sampson, his live feed was on. And so because he has a significant number of followers, people were able to see what's really happening at the hands of LAPD to protesters. So we're experiencing police brutality as we're protesting police brutality, which is really chilling.
I don't know. This is my own impression, but I wonder because I remember, when Nipsey Hussle was murdered and people were out mourning him throughout South LA. And it seemed like the police had a very different orientation on that day than they have had during these protests. I feel like a lot of these officers are showing up like they are at war and the protesters are the enemy.
Right.
I mean, do you see a difference? And if so, what do we attribute that to?
I think your description is absolutely right. And I don't know what that is attributed to other than the system of policing is hugely problematic, and we have to reimagine public safety. That's the only thought I have about it. I don't know why there's differences. Sometimes I know that they're behaving brutally right now.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like when I watched what happened at Nipsey Hussle's memorials, I guess street memorials, maybe we had learned something. And maybe it's because these protests are actually about police, violence. But certainly, hopefully, we'll see some concrete change coming out of this. These protests, not just in LA, not just in all 50 states yesterday and the day before, but around the world as well. What are some of the concrete changes that you believe can come from this?
So we have two primary demands. One, hold police accountable who kill and abuse our people. So that means prosecuting the police when they engage in these really criminal activities. And then if district attorneys are refusing to do that, we're saying that they have to go. So here in Los Angeles, again, we're saying Jackie Lacey has to go. 601 people killed by police, and she's not prosecuting. She has to go. So demand number one globally is to hold police accountable. Our second global demand is to defund the police. And so you were out there yesterday. That was a primary chant. Defund the police. We don't want to continue to spend on a policing system that abuses us. So let's take that money back and invest it in the things that actually make communities safe, like housing and health care and mental health resources and after-school programs. So those are the two calls: hold police accountable and defund the police.
And when we talk about defunding the police, we're looking at the mayor's budget, which is one of the reasons why thousands were in front of the mayoral mansion on yesterday. And you are specifically advocating that people sign on to something called the People's Budget, which is a number of community-based organizations along with Black Lives Matter, correct?
Yeah, so peoplesbudgetla.com is something we've been working on for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And, we began before George Floyd was killed saying that we should not be spending 54% of the city's resources, general fund resources on police. And so it kind of lays out for folks what it means to allocate those funds. There's also a survey that's part of it, peoplesbudgetla.com/survey, where we're asking Angelenos, what is it that you would like to spend on? And overwhelmingly, people are saying that they want to spend on the things that actually create secure and safe communities. At the top of the list is housing. At the top of the list is health care. There's also restorative and transformative justice practices that people want to engage in, support for small businesses. Those kinds of things are what people want to spend their money on. And so we've been advocating around the budget process to tell the mayor to take back his budget and bring us something better.
Now, we do have the opportunity to vote in the DA's race. That's coming up in November. Probably even more important than the top of the ticket, we do have a contest here, a runoff contest between Jackie Lacey and George Gascon. But, for me, one of the things that we really need to look at, and, that I'm really looking at right now, is what the Barack Obama Task Force on 21st Century Policing recommended, which is that we take the police prosecutions out of the hands of local DAs and have it handled by an independent board of prosecutors, whether it's inspectors general or, civil rights attorneys, some kind of impaneled group that has the power to handle these police cases, because there's a built-in conflict of interest. Those DAs work with those cops to get convictions which make their careers shine every single day. So they're only going to go so hard at cops. And then you see, the rare Marilyn Mosby and the way that she is retaliated against for, going after convictions for those cops. And Freddie Gray was not able to convict. So, what do you think about that? About, trying to get this power away from DAs?
Absolutely. I think that, voting is something that's hugely important in the down ballot ticket, right? So we need to make sure that people understand it's not just about getting Donald Trump out, which is important. It's also about the things that affect our lives on a daily basis. So when we think about someone like a Jackie Lacey in office, we need to think about what it means that she won't she won't prosecute police even when the case is really blatant, like when we think about the murder of Kenneth Ross Jr., where we're just getting access to the video that shows him literally being hunted by Michael Robbins, who was a Gardena police officer who had already shot 3 other people. This was his 4th one. And, District Attorney Jackie Lacey helped the Gardena police really cover up that murder by making sure that she didn't prosecute and thinking that she could somehow hide that videotape from the public. And so it's important that people remember that we do have some power. Every Wednesday, we're back to in-person protests. So today, we'll be in front of Jackie Lacey's office at 3 o'clock. And we're demanding that she step down. She can do it now. We don't even have to wait for November. She can go right now. We'll be very happy. We'll make sure she gets to her car safely, and we don't need to see her in that office anymore. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock in front of her office, 211 West Temple, we're there. But then we also know that we have power to vote her out in November. So don't stop voting once you vote for the president. We need you to vote for local elections, which are often much more impactful on our lives.
Absolutely. I feel like we are seeing that play out in real time with these nationwide protests. Some of the reaction and responses of police departments, those decisions on whether or not to prosecute protesters, those come from local officials. And you can see the differences, between what happens under a Mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms or a Mayor Raz Baraka, as compared to other cities. And if this, doesn't inspire you to vote locally, I don't know what will. Dr. Abdullah, I want to go to the phones if you don't mind, because people have comments, they have questions, and you may have some clarity for them if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's go to Wendell calling from Los Angeles. Morning, Wendell.
Hey, good morning. First of all, I'd like to commend Brother Floyd Mayweather for taking the responsibility of sending off Brother George Floyd with 3 separate services, and Colin Kaepernick donating to the defense fund for some people in Minneapolis who were arrested. And to yourself, Sister Abdullah, because I don't know anything about your budget, but I know you are a tireless worker and you're there without the media glare. I commend you for your efforts. You do quite a bit. But I just want to focus on this comment that the chief of police made. When I first heard it, I'm thinking, well, okay, he might be a little, weary, tired, but there's no excuse for him. He's top of the rank and file. And this is the reason why these officers are running amok, because comments like that, if they make comments like that on a podium during a press conference, you can imagine what they're saying during roll call in a police station. There's no need for that. He needs to go. He really needs to go, and I'm glad the commission is on him like like a diaper on a baby right now behind that. And I also like to know your comments on don't fund the police. We need to put, no pun intended, chokehold on our black dollars when it comes to this capitalist society as well. Thank you for the time. Have a good day.
All right, Wendell. Well, let's start with the chief of police. At a press conference, he said, and we didn't talk about it yesterday because I was asleep and I didn't see that, really see that story, and no one brought it up, is that he basically said that the protesters were just as much at fault for the death of George Floyd as the cops who killed him.
Right.
And they had blood on their hands. He did apologize shortly thereafter, but that's not enough for you, right?
No, not at all. And I actually heard him say it. I heard him say that we have blood on our hands, which is, outrageous for so many reasons. One, that we're out there to demonstrate for George Floyd, so that's an absolutely ridiculous comment to make. Two, property is not people, right? And people and lives are always should be valued and never equated with property. But three, and people don't like it when I bring this up, but when Michael Moore was up for consideration as police chief, we were very clear that of the options, he was the absolute worst, because when we talk about prosecuting killer cops, he himself killed people as a rank and file officer. So for him to, of all people, say that we have blood on our hands is the height of hypocrisy, but also, just really telling about the kind of person that he is. So when the brother said, he might need to go, after he made those comments, what we saw yesterday is normally there's about 40 of us who participate every week in the Tuesday Police Commission meeting, who make public comment, who attempt to hold Michael Moore accountable, who attempt to hold police accountable. Yesterday, there were over 19,000 people viewing that, and so many people watching through their Zoom broadcast that it was impossible for other folks to get in. So we know that there were close to 1,000 people watching through Zoom. And so we're going to make sure that Michael Moore is challenged, and you're starting to hear calls, fire Chief Moore, just like we had the chant, fire Chief Beck.
I mean, I saw that on social media yesterday, too. But I got to ask you this. I mean, you ideally would like to abolish police. Is there any police chief that can ever meet your standards?
No. I mean,
to be fair, I mean...
The system of policing is terrible, right? And one of the conversations that we had with people like Rachel Rossi, who I think is probably the strongest LADA candidate that I've seen, and I can say that because she's no longer in the race, was that we can't endorse candidates. Like, even though we thought Rachel Rossi, collectively, we thought Rachel Rossi would be, far better than Jackie Lacey. Black Lives Matter couldn't endorse her because the job of a DA is to prosecute people, and they wind up prosecuting Black, brown, and poor people. They wind up kind of conforming to a system that's not designed for us. And so when you say, is there a police chief that would meet our standards? No. We're going to have to challenge and hold all of them accountable. But there's some that are worse than others, and I think Michael Moore is at the top of the list. Just as a final point, in the last 6 days, 4 people have been shot by LAPD.
In the course of protests or just in general?
No, just in general. But, I mean, I want you to think about that. 4 people have been shot and killed, I should say, by LAPD. And so the killing of people with such regularity is something I think that we've unfortunately grown used to in Los Angeles, but it is not normal. LAPD kills far more people than any other police force. There's many police forces where no one is ever shot and killed by them, and that never happens here in Los Angeles.
5:37 in the morning, we're going to go to Morris from Long Beach. Good morning, Morris.
Everybody, kindness, joy, love, and happiness, and a little bit more Jesus. That's what we need right now. But I just wanted to say that, the protections that Jackie Lacey gives people in L.A. County, we could have got that from a grand wizard. Am I right or wrong? And what's going on with policing is you got to have independent investigations. You can't have the district attorney investigating the cops now. But I want to talk about a book called 100 Years of Lynching. Dr. Abdullah, I know you know about this kind of stuff, but it's called 100 Years of Lynching by a guy named Ralph Ginsberg. And one of the stories I remember in that book was the sheriff would turn over black defendants to the mob in order to prevent chaos and keep the peace. Well, if those officers had been indicted that killed Mr. Floyd, I don't think we would have this kind of outcry that we have today. And for those of you who don't know, the Second Amendment, let's talk about the Second Amendment for example. The Second Amendment was put in to the Constitution because of Georgia and South Carolina. In order to support their slave patrols, they had to have guns in order to enforce or to protect their investments, okay? So that's where your police department comes from. And this is not...
Come on and land for me, Morris.
I'm landing for you right now. I'll do my last thing. Thank you very much. I knew you was going to hit me with that. There's a guy by the name of Henry Giroux, G-I-R-O-U-X. He's an author. If you want to talk about American manifestations, if there was just one word that you would apply, it would be sadistic. Thank you very much.
Only because Morris called twice. We usually ask the people just call once in a week. He said a lot of things about the history of the Second Amendment and the history of policing here in this country. Would you like to add on to that, Dr. Abdullah?
No, I thought those were important points, and we need to, again, remember the history of policing when we say that, we have to fundamentally transform public safety and community safety. The history of policing in this country evolves from the history of slave catching. There is no reforming slave catchers.
Yeah, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Melina Abdullah. There's a bunch of people on these phones, and we will do our best to get to all of your phone calls before 6 o'clock when Steve Harvey takes over and does his thing. It's the front page, Total Talk Expression, Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.